Operations Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. We have two presentations tonight. First up, Arif Fazil from Dewey Engineering about lead commissioning.
Good evening. Thank you. So, can the other presentation, the other one's not up here. Is it two different tabs?
Yeah, the one that says Microsoft.
Oh, sorry. Okay. There you go. Thanks. All right. Good evening. So, one of the things I wanted to cover today is, as you're aware, we're pursuing the ACE grant, the Alternative and Clean Energy Grant from the state. And I think you did receive notification that they extended the meeting date to March 26th. It was supposed to have been originally in November, then it got moved, and here we are, we're waiting for March 26th. They were kind enough to contact us, the director there, and I think he spoke to Steve also, and Brenda, and myself, and the indications are that we are being recommended for it, but certainly he couldn't commit to whether or not we would get the grant. But the indications are that our application is well received. So with that understanding, I was asked to look at, okay, what does it take to keep us in the game or in the grant picture, so to say? Because if March 26th comes, we're losing all this time again. We also have an end date to bid the project, and we have things that we have to do. So looked at that, and everybody's fear was this is a big number. I mean, every number is a big number, but I was able to work with the architect. As I had told you, we had and got proposals from the commissioning agent. That is a prerequisite of LEED, is to have an independent commissioning agent, and I'll go over those proposals in a minute. But in their proposal, we were able to pull out the scope of work that's necessary from now until past March 26th to keep us in the game, and the architect's fee and our effort. And the total potential commitment at this point is $37,835 would be the commitment if we decide come March 26th, let's just say we do not get the grant and decide not to pursue LEED, then that would be the commitment that would be have been made towards it that would not be recoverable. So that's really the information I wanted to share with you. I think the board just needs to decide that, because the team has to keep moving or decide that we're not going to pursue this. If you remember, I have here, I'm supposed to do this, yeah, okay, the LEED scorecard, and you know, to get gold, we have to be at 60 points, and I also told you that we are now required for, if you look on the top left corner, it's LEED version 4. This is the first LEED version 4 project we are doing. Most people are doing. It's a new one. It's much more complicated. It's much more difficult to achieve LEED gold, and the Sandy Run site being not necessarily in an urban area also doesn't necessarily help with the points. But we believe we're on target. If you recall, there's a big solar component, and we're spending a good portion of that $2 million towards it, but certainly I don't think we would be pursuing this if we don't get the grant. So that's why I wanted to let you know what the potential commitment is on that, okay? I can just show you, and then we can come back to questions maybe for all of it all together. I can also just show you, so the proposals we got for the actual commissioning agent, that's these ones. We sent out a bunch of them. We got these 4, we thought were going to submit a proposal. We ended up with 3 proposals, and you can see based on the proposals received, the best value proposal was from Aramark. So that is what is being recommended, but as you can see, the total cost of the commissioning is $125,705. That is pretty much right on target with our budget that we had for the cost per lead. So it's pretty much on budget with that. And out of the 125, we'll be spending the 12, whatever that number was, 1280. 1280? Yeah. The number that we'll be spending out of this 125. So just to put the whole picture together for you, that's it. I also, since I'm up here, just wanted to give you two pieces of good news. One is we were just at the Planning Commission, Upper Dublin Township Planning Commission this week, and we got preliminary final approval from the Planning Commission, so we're now just left to go to zoning and the Board of Commissioners. So we've gotten through that process really well, good cooperation from everyone and good effort from everybody also. We're also working on the modulars, and Bill just told me today we've been working again with the township. I told you we would try to look at some alternate designs for the foundations for the modulars, and we've been able to get everybody on board with that. There'll be a $50,000 credit coming back on the modular foundations, approximately $50,000. We've got to work out the final details, but that seems to be panning out also. So two pieces of good news. But the decision for you is whether or not we should stay in the game for the pursuit of the grant pending March 26th. So what'll happen is, we'll design all the systems, for example, the solar and all. It could still be an alternate bid even after March 26th for some of those components. But there's some work that just has to continue to be done, such as the acoustic work. There's acoustic prerequisites, there's material prerequisites, there's just work. The Aramark commissioning agent has to do a design development review and has to look at the specifications for commissioning. It's all prerequisite requirements of LEED. So, is that good? Any questions?
All right, yeah, thank you, Arif. And to clarify, down in the reports and recommendations, we have the possible recommendations to forward to the general board if we agree on that. But before we do that, anyone have any questions from the committee for Arif? Yeah?
How much is the LEED grant do you think we'll get, or possible amount?
So we've been very successful getting the full $2 million for all our previous projects. That's what we've applied for. That's what our application is in for. How much we're going to get? I mean, typically we've never gotten less than the $2 million, but I also haven't had to wait 3 meetings. So just being honest with you, I don't really have any control over this. I don't really have a good answer as to why we look at it.
Several weeks ago, Ms. Bray and I were on a conference call with the gentleman that is partially responsible for approving the ACE grants. All signs from that conversation were that our project has been recommended for approval, and we did ask at that time if there was any way that they could schedule a meeting between now and the March 26th date so that we could have a little bit more comfort knowing that we're actually approved, and there wasn't. However, I think I'm exceedingly confident that we're going to get the grant, and I've communicated that to the board. So I just wanted to reiterate that point.
Thank you, Dr. Allen.
And it wasn't like the meeting was, the meetings were canceled or postponed. That's the reason that they weren't considered at them. It's because the meetings actually didn't, for the weather or other reasons, that the meetings were canceled. It wasn't that our, application was reviewed and they hadn't made a decision yet. Is that right?
No, our application, we've been told that they love our application. Okay.
Just brief, real quickly, for those in the audience not as up to speed with some of us on the advantages of applying for the $2 million. I mean, in addition to being gold certified, being gold LEED, there's also some financial benefits for the district. At this point in time, what do you think the district will be netting out approximately? I know it changes from time to time.
While Mr. Vazilla is doing that, the LEED grant we applied for, well, the funding that we stand to get is about $2 million. There is about 1.4 $1.4 million in costs that we would incur for items that would be part of the construction. So the balance, whatever that balance would be funds that we could apply to reduce the overall cost of the project. One of the things that I think we need to be very careful about is identifying, and anytime we identify that number, I think we have to always remember that economic conditions continue to change. And so, you know, I'm fine talking about the net money that we would have to apply to the project, but always with the caveat that that number could be increased or decreased.
So thank you for dancing a little bit for me there, Deone. Appreciate giving me some time. So you're absolutely right. The total expenditure that we're anticipating to achieve LEED Gold is a premium of $1.4 million approximately. And so there's a net offset to the project of about 600, but a big portion of that 1.4, 900,000 of it we're estimating for solar panels. So, and that will have an ongoing and continuous offset to energy costs, as well as obviously being a sustainable energy feature for the building. The other improvements are also do give you value, although I can't give you a direct dollar value, but I know some of the other functions that we're doing, such as improving the building envelope, looking at sustainable materials that will be used, low VOC materials, and even the commissioning agent itself, the $125,000, is a value added to the project. We might not do it if we weren't doing LEED, but it's certainly a value added to verify, have a third party verify the functionality of the building is in compliance with the design and specifications in terms of performance. So I think all of those do provide additional value, as you said, so, yeah.
And to be clear, the 38,000-ish that we are talking about committing tonight, that is part of that 1.4 million, right? It's not in addition to those are...
That's correct, those are on the list.
Right.
Yeah, those are in the 1.4.
We're just talking about spending that early.
Well, if we don't get the grant, then,
Well, spending it, period, but yeah.
Have we calculated roughly the savings going solar compared to traditional?
the amount of energy that the solar would offset, yeah, I had given you a number, I don't want to misquote it, but I think it was in the order of about $25,000 a year in energy savings. Yeah, that's the number I gave you. And originally Bob was a little skeptical, but I think I convinced him. So.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Arif. So we'll discuss those topics when we get down to the reports and recommendations. Next up, we have a presentation on enrollment projections from Ms. Bray.
You want us to stick around?
You want to do it now? All right, Brenda, hang on a second. So let's do those reports and recommendations now, and then we can let Arif and his team go. So, down under reports and recommendations, item A are the two particular motions. Are we prepared to recommend that those be moved forward to the full board? Stan?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move those forward to the full board. If there's no further comments? Okay. You're free to go, thank you. Now, Brenda.
Have a good night.
Next one up first.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you.
This will be, I think, a relatively brief presentation this evening. The last few years, we've been looking at enrollment projections and operations. We used to do it at legislative meetings, but last year, you may recall, we had Montgomery County come in and Planning Commission and take a look at our enrollment as well. And so this is just our standard projection that we do every year based on current enrollment as of October 1st, because that's the date that is required for an official enrollment by PDE. And you can see comparisons back to 2008. We used to do them on September 1st, but we've changed the date by a month. So we had 4,053 students on that date, October 1st of 2018, 1,783 K-5, 937 at the middle school, and 1,333 at the high school. Retention rates, in our model that we use here, and it is rather simplistic, but we use a 5-year average so that it takes out some of the peaks and valleys within the calculations when we do the projections. So we look over the last 5 years and calculate the retention rate moving, and what that means is moving from one grade to another. Kindergarten to first grade, first to second, etc. So what I think is most interesting is we again see that 4,053 over at the left-hand side in 2018 and 19. And from there, you'll note that we began predicting what will the enrollment as the years move forward. 1920 is an even 4,000. Please note that we apply the retention rates that we were just on the previous sheet to each of the years, with the exception of first grade. And we use that number that's calculated or highlighted there. That's an average of first grades for the last 5 years. So that number does move from year to year, and that certainly does influence the amounts that run all the way across for the 10 years that we're looking at. So 289 is the number for first grade from 2021 through 2028, and then we back in to the amount for kindergarten at 279. And it is quite a drop for the current year compared to the 292 that we currently have in our kindergarten, or did on October the 1st. I think that number has changed. So we see that we're fairly stable. There is a dip, which we've talked about a bit, 3,975 in the year 2020, or 25-26, but nothing alarming. And then if you look at the enrollment projection using 0 as the axis, or as the base, it really does appear to be very, very stable over the next few years. It's very important to look at those enrollment projections every year, particularly when we're into a building project.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Sarah?
So how accurate has this model been for us in the past?
I think overall it's been fairly accurate, in my opinion. But you can go back and look at the actual enrollments. We don't roll them out every single year and do a comparison backwards. And some years we are off because kindergarten will increase, or you'll note if we were looking at the retention ratios, for some reason between 9 and 10 we seem to have students a slight reduction, and that's been going on for quite a while. But overall, they're fairly consistent as much as anything when you have a number of assumptions. And the further out you go, the less reliable they become, just like any projections.
A couple of years ago, I think when we had the restructuring task force, I did an analysis of how accurate this model was by comparing what it would have forecast in the past to what the actuals were over, I think, something like a 12-year period. I don't have it in front of me. But what it turned out was it was remarkably accurate up to about 5 years.
And that's
And then from there, it went a little wonky, but so it was, within 100 for at least 5 or 6 years, and then after that it got less predictable.
And certainly the projections, enrollment that the county has done, the planning commission, are much more sophisticated. They take into turnover in our neighborhoods as well as development as well. This is strictly based on enrollment and retention.
And those, while they've been more sophisticated, they aren't necessarily more accurate, is what we've found.
That's absolutely true.
And so, I mean, and what you explained here, this is fairly simplistic. We're looking at retention rates, and of course, we know there's other factors going on. We know that there's building, construction, things like that, and this, of course, doesn't account for anything like that.
No, it doesn't account for the real estate transfer when senior citizens move out and young families move in.
I would just comment too that having worked with demographers in the past and spending a lot of money on demographic reports, demographers will tell you that their accuracy rate is really only valid for about a 3-year period. And if you look to our neighbors in Bucks County, Council Rock did a demographic study that pointed to them actually closing a school, and they had to stop that entire process because the demographer and the demographic study were not accurate. So I think looking at retention rates is I think the right way to go, and being flexible, and as more housing comes online, updating from there.
I will comment that while it doesn't explicitly take into account things like transfers of housing from one family to another, it does take it into account how that has happened historically. So unless the rate of that changes in some way, then it is accounted for.
I also think using 5-year averages at a couple of key points in this is also helpful, and it tends to flatten out any extremes, if you will, that occur in any particular year.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you for that. Let's move along. Are there any announcements or communications while you have a microphone in your hand?
That's no, I'm so sorry. There are none.
All right, thank you. And we do have minutes from January 17th. If you have comments on those, please give them to Brooke. Those are to be approved at the next legislative meeting. So moving on to reports and recommendations, we already did A, which was the lead commissioning. Let's move on to B. So, Ms. Bray, Mr. Lester. Dr. Young.
So item B is considering the approval of an increase to the architect's contract. I want to be really clear from the start of saying this. We're going to talk about a much cherished part of the building, and I want to send a very clear message that we are not tonight saying that that cherished part of the building is definitely going away. There are a number of economic factors that are outside of our control. So we need to be proactive rather than reactive and have our architect draw up plans that if we bid the project and the project is over budget and over the threshold that the board is comfortable spending, that we can delete or that we can take those items as an alternate delete. The component of the building that I'm speaking about is the planetarium. Now, we are going to be asking, if the board approves this, to have the architect draw up plans that would rework the mechanical systems and the HVAC systems. In the packet tonight is an agreement for Breslin to be able to do that. The materials that will go live in the board packet tomorrow have very clear statements on the actual document that we are not talking about definitely eliminating the planetarium or definitely making any decisions right now. We just have to be prepared for decisions that may come down the road. Last week when we were meeting with Arif and his team, we were told that one of the Council Rock projects just came in $1.2 million above budget. And there are several other projects in the area that are trending over budget.
Comments or questions from the committee? Sarah?
Thanks. So I understand that we have concerns about the budget overall. For me personally, and considering the new middle school, the planetarium is an essential part of it. And so I stated earlier, and I have that commitment that I support the new building with the planetarium and only with the planetarium. So while I have no objection to passing this to the full board for the next legislative meeting, I will likely vote against this because I don't see the need in spending it, this fee, because I wouldn't be approving a building without the planetarium in the first place.
And I would just like to be clear that no one tonight is saying, I just wanted to be clear for people that aren't in the room and that might be watching, that no one in the room tonight, at least from the administrative side, and I believe the board side as well, that are saying that we endorse a building without a planetarium. One of the things that I've heard over and over again since I've come to Upper Dublin is that the district is reactive, not proactive. And this is a proactive step that we can take, although it might not be viewed favorably, because coming on board, I was under the assumption that we were working on a budget of $70 million, and then that 70 became 72, and that 72 has now grown. And one of my concerns is that we still have 3 aging elementary schools that at some point need a substantial amount of work. So to be clear, just again for the people that are not in the room tonight, no one is discounting the planetarium. This is just a proactive step that we're taking, that in the event that this project bids higher than what we think, and we have a community swell to reduce the cost of the project, we have the option to do so.
It would also give us the option, once we open the bids, if they do come in over budget, we can have a conversation and decide, we'll know exactly how much the planetarium is because we'll have this as an alternate and we can make a conscious decision about whether it's worth whatever that amount of money turns out to be. To be clear, I'm a big fan of the planetarium too. I think it's part of what makes Upper Dublin special, and I especially think that it's not so much I'm a fan of the planetarium, but the curriculum that's delivered in the planetarium I think is really critical. And I haven't yet been persuaded that there's a better way to deliver it. But I do think it's buying us a little bit of flexibility for a relatively small amount of money. I think is, at the moment, I think is worth doing. Art, did you ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just to reiterate, I think it's important for us to know what the cost of the planetarium is going to be, and we will see that when the bids come in, the cost factor. The other important thing is this is not the only Alta League that we're taking. And I think at one point in the near future, we probably should share the complete list of alternate bids. I don't know if we've done that yet.
That was going to be my question, was what are the other
We have? Next month?
possibilities?
Okay, that's all.
And I think we haven't scheduled it yet, but our intention is to schedule another town meeting, and I think the alternates will be a significant topic at that town meeting. Do you have anything to say about that?
So I do think this is an appropriate topic for a town hall because as Mrs. Rothman pointed out, there is, and Mr. Sirota has also pointed out, there's a fair amount of passion behind the planetarium. And I think for the community's understanding, what would serve us well is to understand what all of these different spaces cost so that we can have the conversation. And if that means the project is a little bit more, there's a comprehensive community understanding of what that looks like. And so if we go over budget, what does that look like for the building? What does that look like for debt service? And what does that look like for kicking the can down the road on other projects? We may bid this project and we may be the most desirable project at bid time, and we may get bids that are very much in the district's favor, and we may not have to look at all deletes. But I do think sometime in the month of March, it would be worth having a town hall meeting so that we can discuss openly and not in a board meeting setting where people are limited with public comment and what have you to talk about all of the possible deletions. I do want to also make one more point. Some of the costs are being driven in this project, not only by the economy, but by our own township. And I'm not trying to lay the gauntlet down on the township, and I'm not trying to lay any bad press at their feet, but they are requiring a lot of road work and site improvements that are above and beyond, in my humble opinion, what we should be asked to do. There's a school on the site now, there will be a school on the site when we're done, and so we're being asked to do an alarming amount of work that's costing an alarming amount of money.
Anyone else, comments or questions? Joan?
My question was gonna be, it's mostly been answered, that it will be answered in the future, but what some of the other options for alt-deletes would be, and so that it's not just the planetarium we would be considering, there are other potential options.
Trellis, Jim, there's a document you guys sent us.
Right, there was a document in the past that did include some of these. I think some of them have probably changed since that was last circulated, because we're always visiting these topics, and most of them are sort of infrastructure-y kinds of things, value engineering type of things.
If I could, we also looked at simplifying the courtyard. If you remember from the very first presentation, it was a very complex courtyard that in the new design, or in that original design, there were still ADA issues. And so one of the things that we were very clear with the architect and professional team was that we really needed to scale back and simplify that courtyard. Things like the trellis that would be outside of the cafeteria that really would give minimal blockage to sunlight would be a substantial savings in the project. Because not only, obviously, do we pay for materials, but we also pay for labor, and time is money. So anything that we can do to shorten the duration of certain aspects of the project also does save money.
So when we do have this discussion, are some of these items for definite deletion? Is that one of our options? Because we don't think they're even worth doing. And some of them will be alt-deletes because they're things we want to do unless we get to a point where the cost is just too much.
The things that are for, to use that term, for definite deletion have either already been deleted or wouldn't be presented because it's too late to substantially change the plans. It just incurs costs like these to make a change. What we're talking about discussing more publicly in the future is a list of things that would affect the community that really will be optional after bid time when we see the bids come back. So even the trellis and probably the courtyard may not be in that list. There will have been a decision made on where to go with those, but it'll be things like the Ox Gym is one we've discussed in the past. Planetarium, if we decide to move this forward, would be one. I'm trying to think what other. Oh yeah, the turf field in the northwest corner is one. That actually is being written, we've been using the phrase alt-delete, that one is being written right now as an alt-add. But either way, it's sort of the same concept. We will know what the actual cost is after bid time and can make a decision on it.
I think what's the main point in all of this, and the reason why we need to have these conversations in public, is when we go to bid, when we either accept a delete or not accept a delete, that's when you save the most amount of money. So let's say we don't opt to take any of the deletes at bid time and we actually start construction of the building and then decide, ooh, costs are trending really high, let's lop off part of a building. You get minimal savings. So what we have to do is look at all of these areas that are important educationally, important to kids, important to the community, look at them, their dollar amount, and then really at bid time have that examination about and those conversations about whether we're going to accept them as deletions or not at that time before shovels go in the ground.
Rob?
So I just have a general question in terms of when we're tasking Breslin to do this specific alt-delete for the planetarium, and I think what others are saying, if there's other possibilities, could we not also task to be able to, so that when we're given the information in regards to whatever they might be in terms of cost, that would also be done, especially if we're looking at a March town hall meeting, so that we have that information available to us.
Yeah, so I think when we look at some of the other things that are deletes that we'll be recommending moving forward, there are some things that require a retooling of the building systems and some things that don't. And so this is one of the things that requires retooling of the building. And I'm looking over at Mr. Lester and Ms. Bray to think about what other things might need new drawings. This might be, this is it, right?
I believe this is it. A lot of the other alternates that we'll see, we're going to be different types of flooring, terrazzo versus tile flooring, really quality of finishes would be in the alternate list. I think in terms of drawings, this would be it.
And for two of the deletes that we are alternates, because one is an ad, the turf and as well as the Ox Gym, we've been talking about those in that regard for quite a while, so we've been heading down that path already.
And to be clear, part of the reason the planetarium came to us late, it was for a significant portion of the schematic design phase in the middle of the building. It wasn't really a deletable thing. So it was not even a realistic idea for a significant portion of time. All right, so what we have before us is a proposal to move this document in agreement with Breslin forward to have them redraw some documents. Are we prepared to move that forward to the general meeting? Okay, thank you. Next up, window replacement change order, Mr. Lester.
Yes, we have our first change order for this project. As in any renovations, as you start digging into the building itself, you start to uncover unknowns. And this is our first unknown that we've encountered. It was actually during field measurements by the contractor. They took measurements of the window to make sure everything is accurate on the drawings, and what they're finding were the width of each window bay was changing a little bit. Within an inch, but almost every bay was a different size. Nothing was standard. And as also part of their field measurements, they were directed by the architect to actually remove a window section to make sure it was feasible to go with the plans we know now before they actually start the full project. What was discovered is the window mullions, the vertical aluminum pieces you see between the windows, are not vertically structural. Every fourth one is a column, and it is structural. The pieces that you see now do not support the gravity load of the windows. They were designed to be a wind load for the entire wall system, to keep the wall system from flexing in and out. So what this change is, the actual panels that we have for the windows need to change to support more of the gravity load of the windows and the panel system, particularly on the two-story section of the building. This brings up actually a point which Stan asked our last meeting. Instead of having insulation panels and window panels, why don't we have one giant panel that just stands in place? Well, that's what this is turning to. The window man. So this information was presented to Graham, who's actually the manufacturer of the windows. They're one of the largest for commercial windows in the United States. They're actually a Pennsylvania company. When they took a look at this, they recommend that we go to a single panel system with an integrated frame, which will actually result in a better system for us. So instead of having seal joints between the panels and the windows, this will be one factory tested and installed system for each window bay. So it will be a larger panel, but it's one piece, less likely for any air leaks, water leaks in the future. So we are getting a better product for this. The total cost for this change order is $101,300. We did a lot of investigative work with the window manufacturer. The contractor spent a lot of time here. The architect spent a lot of time. On days where students weren't there, we actually took apart different systems in the building. We were in the ceilings, took bookcases apart to actually get behind them, see what was happening. And this is the best product, the best price for us now.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions from the committee? Stan?
For this cost estimate, is this material or is this material and labor?
Most of it is material. It's actually almost all material from the site. There's not much labor difference. They're going to be able to handle these panels. They're going to have 2 people on site anyway doing this work as they're setting the windows. It will be a heavier panel than they want to deal with, but it is manageable with the people. So this is almost all material cost.
And it would be the same type of material that were used originally, or?
Yes, it'll just be integrated. The insulation panel will be a little thinner. Everything's going to be uniform 1 3/4. The entire frame around the panel will be 1 3/4 thickness. The original panels are going to be 3 inches. When they look at the R value, it's extremely small difference in the energy. These panels do meet the energy code. We are getting a better system that won't leak doesn't have as much potential for leakage in the future. So we will gain there. But the actual energy savings, especially when compared now, is negligible between the system that was originally specified and what we're going to be installing.
Other comments or questions? Vanessa?
Just briefly, do we feel confident that we've maybe hit all the road bumps, so to speak, or the speed bumps? Do we feel as though we've kind of been through it all? Or
The only factor out there now, we're still waiting for pricing. We have all the documents and the advertisement together, is we have to get the price for the actual asbestos removal, the translate panels that are inside. Part of the demolition of the windows was when they disassembled a window frame at the school to see how it is. It actually turns out it's easier to remove the asbestos panel than was originally anticipated. That was done in presence with our environmental consultant, so that is in the specifications. So the only unknown number right now is what it's going to be for an asbestos contractor to actually wrap and remove those translate panels.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
However, if I may, one of the exciting things about renovations is that you sometimes don't know what you're going to find behind a wall or a ceiling. So this is what we know now.
Right.
We did see 3D diagrams to give us a sense for what these were going to look like. Will these look different than what we saw in the diagrams?
No, it'll still look the same. It'll be a one-piece panel, but you'll still have the same looks. We still have to pick colors. I'm still waiting for the color samples to arrive, determine who makes that final choice. We have many different options to go with, but we're looking at something neutral to complement the stonework on the building. The architect's very impressed with the stonework on this building and wants to do something that actually complements the stonework.
Yeah, he made that clear. All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so are we prepared to move this forward to the general meeting, to the legislative meeting? Yes? Yes? Okay. We'll move that forward. Stan? Yeah?
Fired up.
All right, next up, moving on to transportation, Mr. Robbins, transportation software.
Okay, so before Mr. Robbins starts, I would just like to say that I am exceedingly thankful that we're talking about new bus software tonight. I know Mr. Robbins' first couple weeks of school were consumed with parental concerns and otherwise that worked, all the way up through the administrative ranks. So I think I really applaud Mr. Robbins for bringing forth tonight a new option for some better software.
And as Dr. Yanni said, we did have our struggles at the beginning of the year, and from my understanding, it's been that way for the better part of at least the last 4 years with the startup due to the fact that the routing software that we currently have is insufficient. As I jokingly told Mr. Sirota on Tuesday night, I at least wish that it was a disk, because then I could at least use it as a paperweight, because that's about what it's worth. So I vetted 3 different software companies, Edgelog, TransFinder, and Versatrans. They are probably the 3 most popular in pupil transportation software. Edgelog came in at the most expensive, $51,000 for year one, $39,000 for each additional year. But with that, Edgelog does not work with the current GPS that we are using on the buses, which we just started using at the end of January. So the next one was TransFinder, which is one of the most popular routing software companies, but they don't provide a parent application or work with our GPS. They came in a little lower at $31,940 year one, $7,350 year two, with no option for 3 or 4. And Versatrans came in, they have a parent app, they work with the current routing software, or current GPS that we have. They came in at $32,920 for year one, $13,500 year two, and $13,995 for year three. Even though they're a little bit more, the fact that we would be able to provide parents with real data as to where the buses are, where their students are, I think it would be in our best interest to go with this routing software.
Do all of our buses have GPS now?
All of our
Or
school
only ones?
vehicles, buses and vans.
Okay. Okay, any comments or questions from the committee? Or from the rest of the board?
I just, again, can you reiterate what this will allow the community, the parents, to do? And would this take effect in the fall?
This would take effect for the start of the school year. This would, one, provide us with more efficient bus routes. Right now, we literally pin a map and do it ourselves to, set up these routes, especially the changes that we made at the middle school in November. So this will allow us better routes, more efficient, and it'll guarantee that students get picked up on the right side of the street, because we can program it to do that rather than have students cross in front of the buses. But the fact that it has a parent app, I've received several emails since I came aboard last April. I know Dr. Yanni and Brenda both received quite a few regarding parent applications, because other school districts use it. In these parent applications, they can go on and they can see when their bus is within 5 minutes of the bus stop.
How about non-public?
We could roll it out to the non-public parents as well.
So what other districts have this software? What are the reviews, that type of thing?
I reached out to my counterparts at both Montgomery Bucks People Transportation Association and DeVasbo, and 2 of the school districts that got back to me regarding this, Colonial and Quakertown, have been using this for over 15 years, and they have no issues. When they call for any software updates or anything like that, they get immediate assistance. I know my counterpart at Pennsbury, who I worked with for 15 years, when I asked him about Edgelog, which is what he's using, they just did an update 2 weeks ago, and they are still not back up online. So unfortunately, you don't always get what you pay for there. But the reviews have been good. Versatrans and TransFinder, the 2 top dogs in the industry, and in my opinion, Versatrans would be our best bet.
Thank you for doing this. I'm very excited.
Was there?
Can I ask a couple questions since they're an engaging conversation? So I'm going to just lament the fact that I think we not too long ago did approve the software that we've been using, and unfortunately it's not meeting our basis. I guess the question specifically with Versatrans is beyond just a parent application. Does that also provide for you aspect of communication so that if there is something wrong, communication can also be quicker out to the parents as well.
Yes, it actually has its own built-in school messenger service like we use now. It's a lot easier to use than the school messenger service that we use now. We can send text messages, emails directly to parents. I can record an audio and send it out, just as Dr. Yanni unfortunately has had to do the last couple weeks with school closings or 2-hour delays, but it has all of that built into the software. And in fact, we wouldn't even need to have it, like right now we have to go into our student information software to get information about students. We wouldn't have to. It brings all of that information right into the routing software as well, including the pictures that we post.
That was going to be part of my question, integration with other existing systems or other future systems, since some of those are under review. And what kind of training, how confident are you in our ability to wrap our heads around this in time for the fall?
It's very user-friendly. I feel very confident, especially based on the training that they have included in the quote that they provided us, that we should have no problem mastering this system by September.
Is your intent to go, maybe I'm asking this too early, but is your intent to go use this and be ready, or are we going to do sort of a parallel system rollout for the first, or what, how, too soon to ask?
Well, they would be able to, depending on when we move, they would be able to pull our current information from our GPSs to help prepare the routes for next year. And we would also provide them with our current routes so that they can put them in there and then we can optimize from there.
If I could, because I've been around for the last 4 years with the other software that's not worked so well, I don't think it makes sense to run parallel. I mean, I've even looked at these software, and Chris was nice about Edgelog. It's expensive but clunky. That's what I've heard for several years, and the other two are well reviewed, but he's done the research. So I think the first Versatran will be a good choice for us.
I am curious about, when we talk about a parent portal with GPS data for the buses, I'm curious about how authentication and privacy works for that, integration with other parent portals that we already have, if there is any, other related topics.
Currently, right now, we don't have a parent portal that we use.
Well, not for transportation, but
for transportation. So this would work separately from any other parent portal that we have. It would be a cell phone app that they can download. One of my biggest fears when they first started rolling out these parent applications was security. That was, for a few years, my biggest argument against having a parent application, because your kid's getting bullied on the bus, you find out where that stop is, you follow that bus on the app. This only will notify them when the bus is getting closer to the stop. We could also use it to inform parents when buses are running late, if buses are running early. But it would let them know, and we could set the parameters to however we want. If we want them to know 5 minutes before the bus gets there, 2 minutes before the bus gets there, we could set it up, to our preference.
Okay, so I was picturing an app or online service where you could actually see where the bus is right now. That's not the case.
No, that's not the case, for security purposes.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay, so we prepared to move this one forward to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Stan?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, okay, so we'll move that forward. Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Next up is community input.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. Just a few questions about the presentations, and then I have some other facility stuff. The Fort Washington window situation, will those lower classrooms still have doors out to the playground. Is that still in the plan, or has that been nixed? Just curious what would take priority out of the two big alternates? We have the second gym, or maybe three. We have turf field, second gym, and planetarium. I'm just interested to know if you had sort of a order of importance as to what kind of goes first. In this lead document, we get points for a reduced parking footprint. I was just wondering if somebody could explain how much smaller the lots are going to be? Or is it less spaces, or is it just less tar? I just was curious what that meant, because I know parking's not all that great there. Is there going to be a specific presentation on solar for the community, just if we're, being asked to kind of invest in this? And I know that it could net us $25,000 a year in savings. I'm just wondering how much a year it is in maintenance. And we had a lot of unexpected issues with our geothermal, so I feel like a presentation or specifically, for community buy-in might be a good idea with that. And then wondering on the radon update, what is going on with radon, because we're in February. Did we test yet? Did that happen? And then just in the scheme of the construction project on a whole, and also in conjunction with this ADA decree that we signed off on, I just had some questions about the plan for next year. Do we have a plan? What will happen, for instance, with Spirit Days, right? For each grade that happen in Spirit and Fall, are those going to be able to happen because of construction or the decree? The Camp America team building trips, are those allowed to happen? Robbins Park, Franklin Institute, those kinds of educational programs, will those all be able to happen? I think the community needs some reassurance about some of this stuff, because the decree is a legal document. The press release that came out made it seem like we could pick and choose what we're going to do. I don't think it works that way. I feel like, from what I read, the parents have to sign off and be happy with whatever it is that was stated in there. So 6th grade stomp, 6th grade swim and gym, will those happen? What's the plan for the mile run? That might be more of a construction, I'm not sure, which is required by the state of Pennsylvania. Are those kids doing that run? Where are they doing it? How's that happening? Will students be able to go outside for their daily free time at lunch? Is there even space for them to be out there? What's the plan for sports? I know we say there are no home games. I'm not sure if there's no home outdoor games, or if that includes wrestling, if that includes basketball. And how are we busing all these students to all their practices? Are we hiring more buses? Are we hiring more staff? Are we paying for overtime? Is that already in the budget? How are we getting everyone to where they need to be? The 6th and 7th grade plays. We say they can do it at the high school, but the high school has their plays the same time we do. They build their sets. Those sets can't come down and up, and same thing for the students in the middle school. What are the plans for that? I just think that we need to have everything specifically lined out for the community, and I think that there should be town hall meetings about this for the middle school parents, because a lot of this stuff wasn't discussed construction-wise when we were going through the Sandy Run vetting and task force and deciding. I don't think anybody said, and your kids' experience might be severely compromised. There was never discussion of no sports happening there outside or any of that. So I just think we need to see a plan, please. Thank you.
Ginny Vitella, Ambler. I was wondering, besides the fact that we have 300 fewer students in our student body as we're building bigger buildings, I'm wondering if we also look at other statistics about what our free and reduced lunch rates are and the demographics of the people that are in our school district. Also, I want to emphasize more the doors. The window project I have been begging for, obviously for Washington, for, close to 6 years now. But the doors is really troubling. To not have those doors in those classrooms downstairs and even upstairs, out to the playground upstairs for the 1st and 2nd graders is scary to me, not to have that access for those kids. I really want to know what's happening with those doors. I know internally the staff is worried as well. I think it's interesting that the township is giving us a hard time. I have no doubt. I've seen some of their meetings, and I have my issues with them as well. But it is funny how we were going to work with them on the bus depot. I really think we need to work on our relationships with the township and the school district, because at the end of the day, as I've told them and said it before, it's all my one pocket. I don't care. We actually have the luxury of sharing the same borders with our district and our township, and that's fantastic. We should use it better and work together. The increase in fees and having to reduce things in our building. I have said from the beginning, over and over and over again, this is a project we could not afford. And we still can't. And we're not supposed to lose anything that we have now, right? And I wonder if Arif ever decided that he might reduce his 4% fee, because he gets a 4% on the increase on all these upcharges. Just wondering. The $70 million number we came up with was supposed to be, that was the pie in the sky number. We weren't supposed to get to that. It was supposed to be something less, and we had room to move up to 70 million. And it's interesting to me, not interesting, I expected it totally and completely, because when I do a project at my house, someone gives me a price, I absolutely plan on spending 25% more. And that's a little project at my house, let alone a $70 million project. It's really upsetting to see that now, what we were talking about. The buses with the GPS, which I'm so glad to know that we have GPS systems. I didn't know that we did, and I knew that we hadn't for a long time, so that's good news. I'm happy about that. I'm wondering if they can track speed of buses and routes, because I know specifically certain buses cut through neighborhoods that they're not dropping off kids. And not only that, they're kind of whipping around those corners and going over bumps, and people are moving and jostled in their seats. So I'm wondering if we can get a better handle on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, will close community input and answer some of these questions. Dr. Yanni, you want to-
So let me start with the consent decree, and we'll move back, and I'll ask Ms. Bray if I misspeak or if I don't include some salient point that I'll invite her to jump in. So the consent decree has gotten a lot of attention on social media lately, and the biggest part of the confusion and angst is the no outside. The vast majority, of the middle school site will be a construction zone. And that is the genesis of why kids won't be outside. It's included in the decree, but the decision is not because it's in the decree. In terms of spirit days and some of those things, I've already started working with Jill Clark and Rob Albert as to how we can move those and hold those at alternate sites. Field trips, students' curriculum, none of that will be modified by the decree. So field trips to Robbins Park will continue, to any of the other places that were listed will continue. We've been very clear about that with our special education department and also with our teams of teachers. So one of the things that I feel badly about is that the majority of the site around the building will be a construction site. Unfortunately, that's part of building a new building where the existing building is. I can't unring that bell and I can't change that. So, we'll make do, but we don't want to give up things like the special events. In terms of home games in the decree was explicitly mean outdoor home games, so they'll be relocated to other fields and locations throughout the district. And we'll be working, and we already have started working between the departments at the middle school and high school to coordinate use of the stage and the PAC to make sure that there's ample time for each group to set up, put on their production, and then tear down. I know it's not easy for people maybe to believe that we will try to make this as seamless as possible, but you have my commitment and the commitment of the administration that we will do everything we can to keep the students' experience as close to normal as possible, given that we're in a 3-year construction project.
And let me just add to that's that question about how things will work for those years of construction is a question that really probably belongs to start with the principal, not us. I don't think we know that answer other than to know that plans are being developed. So let's see, doors out to the playground, Mr. Lester?
Just one thing, we could go back. Anytime there's construction and a change in a building, certainly think about what the high school students did while they were building this high school where we are now. Each of those grades did have a unique experience, but the overall good that came out of that obviously continues to benefit students today. We will have to make some changes, but we are looking at that and all the activities that Dr. Yanni has already suggested. We've talked about the buses. We've discussed games being played within the district, but sometimes when you're doing construction, you move the competition to away for a whole year, and we will be traveling more. We will have more buses, and that will be necessary for those years of construction.
Yes, the doors at the classrooms. It is per design that those doors will be eliminated to go from the classrooms directly to outside. And that was done for a variety of reasons. Safety was one of those considerations. People need to remember every exit out of a room is also an entrance into the building, an unsecure entrance, where there are no safeguards on those doors, we find doors propped open throughout the district. It's not unique to us, it's every district. Doors are constantly being propped open, accidentally left unlocked, so people can just enter. And then with the students also, on a given day when I walk up to a school, if there's a student walking past the door as you're walking up, the students are kind at this age. They will hold the door open for you. They will open the door for you. They just see somebody they're very trusting. So we are trying to eliminate all these possibilities of other entrances into the building. And the other major consideration is energy efficiency. The least efficient part of our rooms now at Fort Washington is the doors. You walk into the doors, the airflow that you get through doors, the seals, you just can't keep a good seal on doors. That's where most of the energy loss is through those walls. So this was all by design by the architect. New schools, there are no new schools designed anymore with doors from classrooms. This was an older design that was typically, that you saw in the 60s and 70s. That's typically how those rooms were designed. The additions to Fort Washington where kindergarten is currently, the IU rooms, the special ed rooms, those rooms do not have doors to the outside.
Okay, thank you. I can answer the question about points for reduced parking footprint, or you can answer that yourself actually if you go to the U.S. Green Building Council, usgbc.org. There's a one page for every single item in the lead document, but the short version is you have to have each parking lot be no more than 2 acres. There's a variety of other things where they need to be that kind of thing in order to get that point. We do have more parking scheduled in the new building than we have in the current building overall. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is more.
If I could just add into that point, Mr. Shorga. So on the current site of the building, I think that was an inarticulate way of saying it. On the current site, because there are 2 buildings and there are any number of little carve-outs where earth has been paved, we're actually able to reduce that and provide more efficient and effective parking at when the new building is being built, rather than the way that we have parking right now.
Regarding priority of the Oxygen Planetarium turf field, I'm sure each of us has different priorities for those things, and those won't get discussed until we have numbers after bids come back. I mean, people may choose to discuss them, but there won't be any formal, I don't expect any formal process where we will have decided ahead of time, this and then this and then this. I think we'll have to slug it out when we get there. Or hopefully we won't have to slug it out at all, we'll see. Maintenance for the solar?
We do expect maintenance. There will be issues from time to time with panels, either an inverter fails or a problem with the panel. The systems that we're looking at require less maintenance than you would normally see. Also, we're looking at smaller arrays that are skid mounted. Basically, they're a metal mount that it's filled with ballast. It's not fixed to the building. Correct. There's no roof penetrations except for where the cables will go into the building. These will just sit flat on the roof, which is nice for down the road if you ever do need to replace roof or replace a panel, that it is just an easy swap out. One of the things that I really don't like about putting panels onto an older roof is the fact that you're putting panels on an older building. Being that it's a newer building, new panels, this system that they are designing, it'll make it very easy if we do have an issue. But we do reasonable to expect a small percentage of failures or something happens, but we're not a high maintenance item.
Radon update?
Yes, so far we've completed the testing at the high school, Jarretttown, Maple Glen, and Thomas Fitzwater completed today. Because of the weather, Sandy Run was scheduled for Tuesday, or yesterday. They were supposed to start their testing. That has been moved to Friday, so it's going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday testing, and they'll pick the canisters up on Monday. And Fort Washington is still scheduled for February 25th through the 27th.
Great, so when do we expect to hear results back?
Typically the results don't take long. I would expect to have a report back for our March operations meeting.
Great, thank you. If anyone else has comments or questions that I'm missing, just chime in. Chris? Yeah, go ahead.
In regards to how we plan on moving the students for practices and things of that nature, we already do that now with the tennis team to Aiden-Lair and the soccer teams to Edwards Field. So doing this for other sports teams isn't going to be that much of a hardship. In fact, we will probably fill buses more instead of sending half-filled buses over to those locations. But I don't foresee that being a problem. And the other thing, as far as the GPS goes that you brought up, we can track speed, we can track idle time, we can track the routes. So if ever you have a question about it, you can always call me and I can get that information.
All right, there was a question about whether we're looking at other demographic changes besides headcount. Free and reduced was an example given. Is that?
Yeah, so one of the things when I came on board, I heard about this glaring disparity between the elementary schools in terms of free and reduced lunch population. And when we dug into the data, there's not a remarkable difference between Thomas Fitzwater, that has the highest percentage of students free and reduced lunch, versus Maple Glen that has the least amount or the smallest percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. Our free and reduced lunch population is growing at about a third of the rate that the state is growing. The last couple of years, we've seen exponential increases across the state in free and reduced. Part of that, though, is really due to districts doing a better job of getting the word out and making sure that families that are eligible for free and reduced lunch are partaking of that benefit.
Is looking at those kinds of demographic changes something we do systematically?
We do, because we look at that for staffing and we look at that for student achievement. And it's very interesting that in most districts are not closing achievement gaps between students that we consider to be economically disadvantaged versus their non-economically disadvantaged peers. Upper Dublin is starting to close that gap more quickly than schools across the state.
Okay, there was a comment given that I'll just say I agree with regarding working with the township. I do think we need to continue to work with and try to improve that relationship. I don't think it's not an ideal relationship. It's not that it's adversarial or bad, but there's always room for improvement there, and I think there's great opportunity there. So I think it's definitely something worth continuing to pursue. Any other comments or questions? Stan?
Mr. Lester, did you say most new schools, elementary schools, or all elementary schools are now designed without exit doors to the classroom exit doors? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any in this area that have been designed with doors. A lot even have inoperable windows going to the outside now. It's not the direction we're looking at, but yes, you do not see classrooms designed with doors to the outside.
Obviously a good decision not to have exit doors in classrooms.
Correct. Looking at it, we always look at it as a possible point of entry as well, but it's also an issue. We have students who we call them the elopers, who tend to get out of the classrooms and go outside on their own. That happens at every school, so that gives us control. And we're also working with the township on this. Sat down with the fire marshal, we discussed this, and it is going to be, right now they're using some of the exits as part of their fire plan. The doors are not meant for that, and they shouldn't have been doing that over the years, but it's been a practice that was accepted. So we are working on drawing new evacuation routes, and all of our distances meet within code. We will not have any issues with that. I also just sent a recent drawing over to the police department. I'm sitting down with them next week just to review all the plans in the building. So part of the window project and the air conditioning projects is we've had some new updated drawings to the buildings completed instead of just block diagrams that were sketched by hand by somebody. We actually have some good backgrounds now that we work with the police on. That they can identify rooms, routes that their police can use as well. So all this is being done in coordination with police and fire.
Have you had any parents email you about not these new these classrooms having exit doors being removed?
No, I haven't had any emails from parents yet. I've had discussion with staff members though.
And I would expect most parents have no idea.
Right.
But, so I wouldn't have expected to have email about that. But yeah, staff members should know and have the opportunity to speak.
I do want to point out, to add on to Mr. Sirota's comment about the relationship with the township, I do feel that we are starting to turn a corner with the township. I think they're, despite being one township, one school district, both entities operate very, very differently. We're bound by very different statutes and laws, and I think over the last couple of months there's been a lot of coherence making about what we can and can't do. For example, I always hear, well, we don't need all the grounds crew because you can have the township, do your work. Well, we have a collective bargaining group, so we can't do that. And that's just one example, but I do think we are starting to see a turn for the better in the collaboration, communication, and cooperation between the district and the township.
I have a question for Mrs. Vitale.
No,
I can't ask a question.
After the meeting. Anything else from, any other comments from members of the committee or the rest of the board? Okay, so our next operations committee meeting will be March 21st at 6 p.m. right here in the Cardinal Room. And we are adjourned. We'll reset in about 5 minutes for the finance meeting.